This is Tinian, a remote island in the Pacific. It used to be home to North Field, the base responsible for servicing the aircraft that dropped the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. After World War II, America abandoned the airfield to the jungle. It was no longer needed. However, recent satellite images show land clearing work. Military crews are clearing the dense overgrowth to unearth the local infrastructure. The United States is rehabilitating its airbase back to what it originally was to take on a new enemy. The Pentagon hasn't needed Tinian in decades, but China has developed a new class of weaponry capable of striking distant targets, including American bases in the second island chain. So the Pentagon is adapting. To counter China and prepare for possible conflict, the US is turning to a strategy called hub and spoke. This approach is about spreading out resources and assets across a larger area instead of keeping them all in one place. So, if a major American base came under threat, the local aircraft would fan out to a network of smaller sites. This would keep America in the fight through its readily equipped smaller bases. Meanwhile, the larger base would maintain itself as a forward deployment hub to the smaller bases, which would throw a wrench in the enemy's targeting processes. And so, as China's arsenal expands, American engineers are scrambling to revive World War II-era airfields in the Pacific, of which there were 93 during wartime compared to just 33 today. However, most of these old, forgotten air bases are located on non-US territory, countries with whom Washington isn't on the best of terms anymore. So, in addition to the overgrowth, there are also plenty of political knots. But while clearing brush is labor, untangling politics is art. Tensions between China and America come as the PLA Navy has assembled the largest naval force near Taiwan in decades, and one that is set to grow even larger in the coming years. Recent satellite imagery shows 3 to 5 new barges being built at a Chinese shipyard designed for amphibious assault. Each of these barges would put out a 120-meter long bridge and offload large numbers of tanks directly onto Taiwanese roads. It's a rather unique way of logistics, but the reach of these vessels means Chinese forces can cross to the shore at sites previously deemed impossible. Understandably, the Taiwanese are on high alert, both militarily and politically. Taiwan's leadership has recently conducted a tour of the Pacific because a Chinese-Taiwanese conflict inevitably draws the United States into the fight, with the wider Pacific serving as the battlefield. However, while China's buildup continues, there is not a single Chinese media outlet that covers it. Most of the discourse comes out of the United States. By the way, the website you've been seeing is called Ground News. I use it all the time, especially for researching controversial topics like this. There's just so much confusion about what's happening in and around China. Every side tries to twist the truth to their side, but with Ground News, I can check out local and regional sources, so I get to see all sides of the Taiwanese conflict, and I truly believe that is the best way of understanding this tricky region. I can't stress enough how important this is, which is why I asked Ground News to sponsor this video. I mainly browse the blind spot page, where they share lots of interesting stories that other news outlets often miss due to biased reporting. Go to ground.news/Caspian or scan the QR code on the screen to learn more. Subscribing through this link gets you 40% off the Vantage plan. Also, by subscribing, you're directly supporting my channel. Thank you, Ground News. The link is below. On the southern tip of China's Hainan Island lies Yulin Naval Base. Established in 1955, it is the traditional home of the PLA Navy. Throughout the 20th century, it existed as little more than a support outpost for China's then meager South Sea Fleet. Today, however, Yulin Naval Base is the keystone in China's naval revival. Together with 200 additional military sites, it forms a $50 billion commitment to Chinese supremacy in the Pacific. Admittedly, the US Navy remains at the top of the food chain, but China's growing naval power is shaking things up. The PLA Navy plans to dominate the first island chain by 2030 and the second island chain by 2050. China is speed-building frigates, submarines, aircraft carriers, missiles, rockets, and aircraft. And as it passes one milestone after another, the scale and speed of the rearmament has raised alarm bells in the Pentagon. This video, released by the PLA Air Force, shows a nuclear-capable bomber launching a simulated attack on what appears to be Anderson Base in Guam. Forward operating bases in the second island chain, such as Anderson, form the primary staging point for the United States in any conflict in the region. Located less than 5,000 kilometers from the Taiwan Strait, Guam is crucial to America's ability to project power in the Pacific, and that makes it a strategic target. While Chinese forces lag behind their American counterparts in relative firepower, they have a numerical advantage. Advances in missile technology, along with a growing fleet of unmanned aircraft, means that Beijing is increasingly capable of overwhelming existing defenses. This is not lost on the Pentagon. So, to better defend Guam, the US military plans to install a layered missile defense network incorporating systems such as THAAD, Aegis, and Patriot. However, even the most advanced defense system can be overwhelmed. As such, America is changing its defense. Instead of fighting China pound for pound, it is dispersing its aircraft to make it harder to destroy them. That's where the hub and spoke system comes in. As it spreads resources and assets over a larger area, it gives America greater agility while reducing the risk of another Pearl Harbor-like attack. This need for greater agility is because of China's dramatic technological advances, particularly its rapidly expanding arsenal of missiles. That includes the DF-26, an intermediate-range ballistic missile known as the Guam Killer. This missile has an operational range of roughly 4,000 kilometers, but its production rate is just as impressive. The US Department of Defense estimates that China has expanded the number of DF-26 missiles from 300 in 2021 to 500 in 2022, with 250 launchers for the missiles. Another major threat is the DF-17, a hypersonic missile. This one has a shorter range, 1,600 kilometers, but it launches a glide vehicle and it can be fitted onto submarines. Unlike a traditional ballistic missile, which follows a predictable trajectory, hypersonic glide vehicles can change direction mid-flight, making them much harder to shoot down. These missiles, DF-26 and DF-17, place Anderson Base at risk. Recent war games estimate that in the event of a war, up to 90% of US aircraft losses would occur on the ground. To put things in perspective, the attack on Pearl Harbor, seen as the worst defeat in the history of the US Air Force, saw only 188 of the 390 aircraft destroyed, a loss rate of 48%. As devastating as that was, imagine what a loss of 90% of aircraft would mean. It would render the war lost before the battle is over. The immense size of the Pacific Ocean confines naval warfare to a limited number of maritime choke points. During World War II, Japan controlled much of the second island chain. The Mariana Islands, which include Guam, Tinian, Peleliu, and Saipan, were the prime location of Japanese operations in the Pacific. By occupying these islands, the Japanese prevented American power projection into the Philippine Sea, protecting the Japanese mainland. Conversely, after American forces took the islands, the B-29 superfortress was brought within round-trip range of mainland Japan, Taiwan, and the Philippines. This restrained Japan's military options and ultimately sealed its defeat. Today, the threat has changed, but the strategic advantage of the Mariana Islands remains the same. The restoration work on Tinian is one of the many projects that represent a fundamental change in America's military posturing. Reconstruction is also happening in Guam. The Northwest Field is being rebuilt. Disused airstrips are being restored, the number of landing sites is being expanded, and new barracks are being added. Meanwhile, in Peleliu, work teams are clearing the jungle around old airfields while also expanding the existing road infrastructure. Further east, in the Philippines, $35 million has been set aside for the construction of additional aircraft ramps at Basa Air Base, with its exclusive rights reserved for the US Air Force. Finally, US troop deployments have increased in quantity and quality in Australia, where bases such as Tyndall serve as potential backup airfields beyond the expected zone of combat. All this plays into the hubs and spoke strategy to fan out personnel, cargo, and aircraft. Zooming out, there are 60 additional former airfields in the Pacific that could be reactivated. However, anything beyond the Mariana Islands is outside American jurisdiction, and that complicates things. After World War II, the United States secured the allegiance of Palau, Micronesia, and the Marshall Islands through a series of agreements known as the Compact of Free Association. These agreements guarantee Washington exclusive defense rights in exchange for generous financial aid. In all cases, however, there has been significant pushback. In Palau, the construction of a TACMOR radar system has provoked environmental concerns, and a legal bid to cancel the construction has already begun. Meanwhile, its Senate passed a resolution rejecting a proposed deployment of US missiles on its territory. The same environmental, indigenous rights and land use objections are raised in the Federated States of Micronesia, where the US Air Force has proposed a $400 million upgrade to make the Yap International Airport fit for military missions. At large, many of the Pacific nations understand all too well that they stand on the future battlefield, and they want no part in that. Adding to the complexity, the Pentagon needs more legal rights to build the infrastructure it needs for greater strategic depth. Securing permanent basing rights and building infrastructure for missile systems means stepping over the sovereignty of the local populations. However, considering the history of colonialism and nuclear testing in the region, that is not as simple as it seems. While the local concerns are sincere, they're often amplified by China. Close business ties between Chinese investors and local legislators, as well as an ever-expanding list of opportunities for islanders to study or work in China, have strengthened Beijing's reputation as a viable partner. That may seem like a small change, but for a region that has only known American power, it is a crucial one. And so, while America is getting ready for future conflicts by reactivating World War II airfields, most Pacific countries would rather remain neutral or make sure China is equally involved. Peace, after all, is a suspension bridge held in place by the tension of equal forces. I've been your host Shirvan from Caspian Report. If you approve of what we do, please leave a comment, hit the like button, and mayhaps share the video. In any case, thank you for your time, and Sawal.